The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Castro, your testimony said that we must do at least three things in an immigration reform: further strengthen border security, streamline the legal immigration process so that law-abiding companies can get the workers they need, and create a path to citizenship for the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants. It seems to me that there's one further thing that any good immigration reform should do, and that is to eliminate unjustified invidious discrimination that is present in the system. And one such discrimination is certainly the fact that people other than gay and lesbian people can sponsor their spouses for immigration into the United States so that you don't keep them separated, whereas under our laws, of course, gay and lesbian people cannot marry other gay and lesbian people. At least the federal government will recognize that, a few states will. So that the laws work what I would call a cruelty on people, an unnecessary cruelty, because under our laws it may be that the lover or partner of an American citizen can't be here, and under the laws of this foreign country it may be that the American can't go there, and you are keeping people apart. Now, there is legislation called the Uniting American Families Act, which would establish an equivalency so that the question of gay marriage apart, which is really a separate question, we will not have the cruelty of keeping loving couples apart by allowing a gay person or a lesbian person to sponsor his or her partner for immigration. This has broad, we're reintroducing that bill today, by the way. It has broad bipartisan, it has support of Republicans as well as Democrats, church leaders, members of the Hispanic Caucus, and now recently the President of the United States. Do you think this is a good or essential piece of a comprehensive immigration reform?
I believe that it would be a good piece for comprehensive immigration reform, and as you suggest, I believe that there would be significant support for that. I myself support marriage equality, but even for folks who support, for instance, only civil unions and certain rights that partners would have, I believe this is right in that vein and that it makes sense.
Thank you. And I just want to make clear that this is not the question of gay marriage. If we had gay marriage, it would be moot, but this is a question of enabling people to be together who otherwise cannot be, for no purpose at all. Purposeless cruelty, which the United States should never engage in. I have a second question for you, and that you note in your testimony that the immigration laws are broken across the board, harming businesses and separating families. There are some who support the idea of increasing the number of green cards in the employment-based system. We've heard that. But only if a commensurate number of green cards are eliminated from the family-based system. Do you buy into this zero-sum approach? And can we be a nation that supports both business groups in keeping families together?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I agree with Dr. Aurora that this is not a zero-sum game. There's no reason that we need to choose between these. I believe that we should have both employment-based and continue our family-based allocation, as well as, of course, addressing the issue of high-skilled immigrants and other skilled immigrants. I would also frankly suggest that being able to pick crops in the sun, under the hot sun, for 12, 14 hours a day to do back-breaking work is a kind of skill. Maybe not what we would call a high skill, but certainly a skill that many, many folks either do not or cannot do. And so to answer your question, I believe that is a false dichotomy.
Thank you. And finally, I have one question for Mr. Teitelbaum. Ms. Teitelbaum, you say that some of the Commission's strongest recommendations were against temporary worker programs, noting that admitting large numbers of temporary workers in agriculture and other fields would be, quote, a grievous mistake. I must say I'm very ambivalent about this. On the one hand, I worry about guest worker programs bidding down U.S. wages for American workers. On the other hand, the share of the native-born workforce without a high school diploma was around 50% in the 1940s and 50s, and it's now down to about 6%. And as the native-born have grown better educated, U.S. workers have been less willing to engage in farm work, but the demand for farm labor has not decreased. So my question is, if we still have a need for on-the-farm labor, but a giant reduction in the population of native workers likely to look for work in this sector, Do we have a need for a guest worker program? Is it naive to think that if we cut out foreign workers that these jobs will just be filled by American workers? And is such a program, in fact, cutting down on bidding down American wages?
Again, this is going to be my thoughts, not the Commission. The Commission was recommending against large-scale temporary worker programs for the reasons I indicated. I agreed with that recommendation. I believe it's still to be true. There is a very large population in the United States of low and unskilled workers, many of whom are unemployed and relatively unemployable. The conditions of work offered in some of the jobs you're talking about are really not very attractive compared to their alternative sources of income as citizens. And therefore, I think you have a situation in which the market disposes towards dependence upon unauthorized migrants. In addition, you have decisions made by employers as to where to invest or where to plant and what plants to plant. Are they labor-intensive plants or not labor-intensive plants, based upon the assumption of continued access to this kind of labor. So you get a kind of mutual dependency, if you will, situation in which it is correct, as the growers might say, if you took away my workforce now, all my plants, all my crops would rot in the field. But if they were pretty certain they weren't going to have that future workforce in the future, they would make different decisions about what crops to grow and where to grow them. But why should they if they assume they're going to have that workforce?